Welcome back to Inclusive Design 24, 2021, brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Intopia, Fable, Arc, and Adobe, and Gold supporter, Tetralogical. You can follow us on Twitter at ID24Conf, and if you have any questions for the presenters, tweet them using the ID24 hashtag for a Q&A at the end of the session. I am once again excited to be joined by our guest host, Lucy Greco. Lucy, over to you.
Thank you, Adrian. I am really excited to be here tonight. This is a very exciting talk going to be presented by Faith McGee, and she is talking about accessible gaming. It's all in the code. To you, Faith. To you, Faith.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you for the organizers. Thank you to the organizers of this event. It's really great. It's really impactful and helpful for the entire inclusive design and inclusive research community. So, hello, I'm Faith. I'm the quantitative research manager on the XT team in IT for electronic arts. If you're unfamiliar with electronic arts, you may have heard of some of the titles that we publish, such as FIFA, Apex, Plants vs. Zombies, Madden, etc. We have over 20 studios. We're a global company, and we have 52 offices all over the world. I want to take a moment to just thank individuals who've been part of this whole experience and journey. 16 months ago, I was given the opportunity to run the first ever inclusive research practice in IT. And our projects have run the gamut, really, from employee to player-facing experiences. We basically work on everything that marketing doesn't cover. So game developer tools, employee intranet and ticketing, player help, and player support. My team is the largest team of inclusive researchers in the org. And we've also partnered with other amazing groups within EA satellite cohorts that are focused on the same thing, which is building a more inclusive product. So what I'm hoping for you is to take some of my story that I am giving you today as inspiration so you can build your own inclusive design or inclusive research practice at your own company. So just to go over the agenda, I'm going to talk about inclusivity in games. I'm going to talk about how we got started, making those little 1% incremental increases count to the bigger picture, and then the future of gaming. And spoiler alert, it's already happened, but at other companies. So let's just talk about the current state. 1 in 3 people on the planet play video games. So look to your left, look to your right. One of the 3 people, if you're in the room by yourself, it may be hard to do this, but it's pretty much like a known thing that, a lot of people, a third of people play video games. This year, there are 2.8 billion people who play games, and it's expected to grow to 2.98. So we all know that the average gamer is a 16-year-old kid living with their parents. Nope, that's not quite correct. So bucking kind of like these assumptions, the average age is 34 for people who identify as male, 36 for people who identify as female, and the average gamer owns a house and kids. When we think about the people who are playing, specifically, 45% of US gamers identify as female. People of color, Black and Latinx youth in the US spend more time per day on both mobile games and console games than white youth. 57% of video game players in the US between the ages of 6 and 29 will be people of color in less than 10 years. And then when we look at just the income brackets, people who make more than 90K are slightly less likely to purchase video games, 9% compared to 12% of the population making under 90K. So a huge percentage of this market are players with disabilities. So 46 million disabled gamers in the United States. And then you would expect that we must have a lot of these different underrepresented groups working for us at EA. But the reality is that our employee population doesn't quite make up the different underrepresented groups. So according to our 2020 annual report, the median employee was identified to be a software engineer in Canada with the annual compensation of $98,000. It is also noted that 23% of people who work at EA identify as women, 54% are white, 22% Asian, 3.2% Black, and 4.3% two or more races. And this lack of diversity is actually seen throughout the gaming industry. So what we see is Black characters comprise of 10.7% of characters, roughly on parity with the most recent census of 12.3% of Americans are Black, and only 2.7 characters are Latinx relative to 12.5% representation of the US population. So it's also actually quite smaller when you think about who these Black characters are represented in video games. So a lot of these characters are supporting characters. They're also athletes. There is a really amazing researcher, Kishana Gray, who's also the author of Intersectionals Tech, Race, Gender, and Deviance in Xbox Live, two different journals that she has written, who has said, in film, there's historically been three roles you see: Black characters in Black as violent, Black as the sidekick, Black as help. This has also been true in video games. So it's also really important to think about not just like the representation in gaming and characters, but also, you know, who they're representing and what types of characters they're representing. So we see that, you know, EA is not alone with this type of representation. We see that 81% of game developers, according to the International Game Developers Association, identify as white Caucasian, 7% Hispanic Latinx, 2% Black, and 4% Southeastern Asian. So really what we're talking about here is diversity and employee. And you want your employee population to mirror your customer base. And I'm about to get into that reason. So we started an inclusive design, inclusive research revolution at EA. And just to kind of go and frame what inclusive research is historically. So it's pretty new. There have been a lot of different other types of research methodologies that have been used over the ages. So we're looking at surveys that have been around since 3200 BC. They had resurfaced, especially in 1824 when they were used during the presidential election. Then you have Think Aloud, which is generally used in user testing and usability testing. That dates back to Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis. Then you have benchmarking, which we use as a way to reference UI improvements today, but that actually came from surveying land. You have other methodologies such as A/B testing, which a lot of people who are in the digital space are familiar with. That actually came from the farming technique that was popularized by Ronald Fisher. And then you have card sorting, which has been around since the 1950s. And then in 2001, an Australian researcher named Jan Walmsley used inclusive research to describe a family of methods to research people with learning and intellectual disabilities. But today, inclusive Research, inclusive design encompass much more than that, than just the discussion of physical or cognitive disabilities. It touches on a lot more nuance. A lot of inclusive research was born from participatory research, which is basically designing with a group of customers or users. So traditional design thinking is where a group of professionals, experts come in, they try to understand where the pain points are, and then they go away and they create a solution and they implement that solution on a customer base or an audience. And what this does is it really imposes the solution on a general demographic. And what we're really trying to do is design with rather than impose. When you look at kind of the success of inclusive design and gaming, you see that the features that have been developed have actually been adopted by a broader market. So people actually really love inclusive design features. So you see for Uncharted 4, over a third of the players use a one-handed control option. You see for Assassin's Creed, 60% of players actually turn on their subtitles. And then for Assassin's Creed again, you see 95% of players left the subtitles on. So how can game development become more inclusive? So according to a 2020 Performance survey, we see that people in game development really want to see an improvement to work and life balance. I think this is definitely a reaction from the pandemic, also a reaction to the population of parents who've had to shoulder a lot of responsibilities and maintain those responsibilities while trying to ship games out. We also see that people want to improve accessibility features. Obviously, this is extremely important. Increase representation and diversity in game development, and fund more startup studios representing women and minority groups. So the question comes up, what makes a product inclusive? Which is a really great question. So code literally makes or break whether or not a product can be open for business. And when we think about this in the framing of what happened in the 70s, people were protesting the inability to use public transportation because they did not have wheelchair lifts. People were protesting on the streets. And what code is, it's a metaphorical lift, or what it can provide is a metaphorical lift, meaning that if we build products that don't meet accessibility standards, are not equitable, we are literally passing by users who can't access our products and can't use this infrastructure, which is the internet. So we look at some of these things that really make up product inclusive. We look at code that adapts to user technologies and needs. So code is the product's DNA. We look at the context. We look at whether or not it meets the needs of varying groups and all of the different types of underrepresented groups. We try to consider that context. So is the user moving through life using both hands all of the time? Generally not, right? So we're thinking about how our product is used in a variety of scenarios. Sometimes this is referred to as putting lens. So what you could do is create some lenses that you'll put over the product, whether it be dyslexia, or whether it be autism, or whether it be, whatever it is, being able to see how your product could be potentially used with this lens. We look at opportunities to customize the interface for the users to be able to customize the interface. Does it offer a dark mode? And then we look to achieve design that has a high tolerance of errors, so that our users, and especially users who are older or have difficulty with mobility, can be able to use our products without creating critical errors that prevent them from completing tasks. So when we look at kind of the end goal here, we cannot have we can't have inclusive hiring without an inclusive workplace. So it's not enough to open up the door and say, underrepresented groups, come on in. We need to have a environment that's equitable for underrepresented groups to thrive. And so it's really important to look at your workplace and look at that environment, the tools and resources that people use to be successful. Then it's important to start with diverse hiring. Then with this diverse hiring, you're bringing in these rich, diverse perspectives who are using these perspectives to build this product that's very adaptable and resilient. And that is what makes inclusive products. So one important thing to do is really look at your maturity level at your company. So where does it fall? Does it fall in unrecognized? So it's not necessarily considered important, and diversity inclusion programs primarily live in HR. Is it interested where there's some ad hoc implementation and product development, but it's not uniformly productized across product suites or as a formal strategy? Is it invested where you have people who consider it very important? It's a great strength. It helps increase market share. Formalized programs roll out. An inclusive design lead is named. It's present. In-house resources are dedicated to this effort, and it's implemented throughout the product lifecycle. Or is it committed, where critical and senior stakeholders, including product managers and product owners, are involved in ensuring its implementation? Is it engaged? Is it one of the core tenets of your organization? Is there a C-suite executive that oversees the implementation? And is it part embedded? Is it part of the fabric of the company? Does the product boast this resiliency and adaptability that appeals to a wider market? So once you identify where your organization is, then you can start creating a roadmap. And on this roadmap, you start putting these different efforts in. So whatever that roadmap looks like for your company, wherever you are in maturity, that's where you can start. So I just want to kind of walk back a little bit and just talk about the tools and resources, the enterprise software that you use at a company. So part of what we do is we audit our employee tools and our enterprise software, because again, without these tools meeting accessibility best practices and standards, we do people a disservice by hiring them and then having them use tools that don't provide them with a successful start. So look at your tools at your companies. If people with disabilities can't use it, you need to change vendors, or you need to have product updates so that people with disabilities can use it. So what's really important there is that making accessibility audit part of your vendor procurement process, working with the product team and ensuring that as they are going through the whole RFP process, that they're putting accessibility requirements in. If you have an aging employee population like most companies, you need to think about the changing needs. For instance, eye degeneration occurs at age 40. For engineers, the onset of disability occurs around 20% between the ages of 40 and 49. We see this as the second leading cause of not working for engineering is because of disability. So 34% of non-working population, according to the National Science Foundation. So we need to be very cognizant. Not only are we using vendors that have accessibility as part of their they've made it a priority, or that they have it as part of their near-term roadmap. So just talk a little bit about how prevalent WCAG nonconformance looks like. In 2021, WebAIM conducted an accessibility evaluation of homepages for 1 million websites. And just to kind of go over their methodology, the evaluation conducted using a Wave standalone API. And they use some additional tools. They found that 97.4% of homepages have detectable WCAG2 failures. And these failures look like low contrast text. So we actually see an increase of low contrast text failures from February 2019 to February 2021. From 96.5 current, that went up from 95.3. We also see that we see things such as missing alternative text for images has actually gone down. From February 2019, it was at 68%, and 2021 it's at 60%, which is good. But we've seen that missing form input has gone up from 2019, which was 52%, and now it's at 54%. So again, it's really important to evaluate the tools that people are using and invest in making sure that you're running these audits and any homegrown tools that you're building at your company. To speak a little bit more about that, so as I said before, I work in IT, and we actually build over 80 products for game developers. One thing that we have been really proud about is an effort which is a component library. So if you are unfamiliar with the design system, it's a collection of repeatable components and a set of standards guiding the use of those. So basically it's components, design components that include code that could be used for different products. According to Forbes, 68% of companies use a design system to build digital products. When you make a design system that is not only meets accessibility best practices, but provides an equitable experience for users, then you're able to use that across many different products. At least it gives you a head start in understanding that these products will then provide a more equitable experience for different types of users. So again, our goal is to have the design system that is flexible so that we can build digital experience that are consistent and also at a low cost for engineering. So another important piece to this on winning inclusion is having inclusive and diverse recruitment for any type of testing that you're running, and if you're auditing your tools. So I'm going to give you 3 options here, but there are a lot of options out there for increasing diversity in your recruitment pool when you are testing anything at your company. And happy to answer any of those questions after this, or if you feel like you would like to reach out to me, can provide you with more options. So at minimum, recruit no more than 1/3 from any ethnicity and no more than 1/6 from any geography, as opposed to a more general and ambiguous instruction of just recruiting a mix of people for testing. A middle of the road approach to take is adding diversity across a roadmap. So as you're creating either a product roadmap or a research roadmap or a design roadmap, it's important to be able to think about, if you're strapped to on time and resourcing, how you can add diverse participants along the way so that it's not an all or nothing type of approach. So what it could look like is you have a research study in Q1, you'll you'll focus on adding a underrepresented group of participants in that study. And then in Q2, you'll focus on recruitment for another underrepresented group and so on. So the idea is that you were not like having black and white thinking on recruitment, that we're at least trying to build up the diversity of perspectives in the product development process. And this final is the more ideal if you are recruiting in the United States. And also, if you don't know the makeup of your employee population, which if you are testing internal products, you may not, because sometimes that information is a little bit difficult to get from HR. If you are recruiting for a consumer facing product, and you may not know, or whatever it is. This is kind of a little bit of a template so that you can understand how to recruit. So you would look for 29.4% of people who are 55 and older. Again, this is for recruiting for a demographic that reflects United States. And 19% who mention rural when you have given them the screener. 12.5 African American, Black, or at least 18.5 Latino, Latinx, Hispanic. 4.5 LGBTQ of the total sample size, and then accessibility 15% of the total sample size. And this is these are suggestions that a research company called Answer Lab has given. They have conducted many tests on how to sample, what diversity in research and testing looks like. And so if you have additional questions, happy to provide resources that send you over to Answer Lab's way. So if you are auditing your own products, you may wonder, well, how can I do this within my company? Or, how can I even do this on a consumer facing product? And you can actually get a lot of support from what are called ERGs if you have ERGs at your company, and those are employee resource groups, and they generally are employee-led groups that have kind of a charter and mandate, and they're able to help support different initiatives in the company in terms of being able to provide some perspective on certain representatives. You can also create an employee panel. And this could be a group of employees that you can go to, whether it's on a quarterly or a monthly or whatever it is basis, and ask them questions or ask them to audit certain products that you're creating. You can also go to Slack channels that are, I want to say, kind of like semi-public, but they're private. I mean, so Mixed Methods has a Slack channel that is specifically for recruitment. And you can ask for people to kind of meet your criteria. You can also go to nonprofit. So for me, it would be like a nonprofit like Able Gamers, and ask them for help with recruitment. And then you can also contact influencers on social media who can be really helpful, can spread the word through their follower base to help you with recruitment. Again, a lot of people will help and donate time just because they support the mission, but you can also offer other things such as incentives like gift cards, company merchandise, if you have that available to you, and in my case, game codes. So how do you invest? How do you get investment? So as a team, we really have to commit to having a cohesive story to tell. And this helps us storytell to leadership on why they should invest in inclusive research, inclusive design. With that, we will do such things as have a roadshow. So going to certain executive sponsors, going to stakeholders, kind of telling the story of inclusive research, why it's important for the company, and not just for the good doery of it, for the fact that it does increase market share and does create better products. Creation of workshop materials. There are a lot of sites that you can get wonderful workshop materials, and you can start workshopping them in different groups in your company. And there's also the inclusive research playbook that I have at the end of this presentation today that you can access. It's a little bit of a starter guide for people to be able to start up some of these efforts in their company. So just to kind of talk about what it looks like for success. If you are wanting to make inclusive products at your company, I would suggest thinking about it from making these little 1% wins. These little 1% wins incrementally will make up for a very large win. So pack your bags, get some snacks, prepare for the long haul, because an inclusive product and an inclusive workplace will take a while. So you want to celebrate and really ground in the small wins. So for us, we had our story about this tool that was used for FIFA called the Connectivity Report. And what we were able to do is share with the FIFA leadership just who was kind of playing the game, who were really big advocates of the game, and show them having a hard time using this product because it did not meet accessibility best practices. We were really able to kind of paint this picture in our storytelling, in our presentation. We showed video, we showed personal stories. The idea there was, instead of telling the story of like the mass demographic, we really focus on individual people, putting faces to data points, being able to show exactly how players with disabilities were having issues accessing this particular tool for FIFA. And what we were able to achieve with this is we were able to get a lot of buy-in, because we were changing the hearts and minds of these leaders, and being able to show exactly how their customer base was having these pain points and this friction in this digital journey. And what we were able to achieve was getting resourcing for engineering to be able to make these changes, to make the tool meet up to WCAG standards, compliancy. So we partnered with our accessibility director, Karen Stevens, who is amazing. And I would definitely look her up to map out what the customer journey looked like for people with disabilities at EA events. It was really important as we were reimagining not only just the registration site, but what it was to physically go to these events for players with disabilities. We found a host of things and areas of opportunities that we could improve and make the experience more equitable. And then we were able to get that buy-in again with leadership and resourcing to be able to make these changes. Again, it was through storytelling. In UX research, there is a method called user exposure. And what it is trying to ensure that leadership, design, product managers get user exposure. What it does is it helps build empathy. And with that empathy, we're able to give these decision makers a story to be able to refer to when they're making these very critical decisions on behalf of the users and the product. And then again, we have used a lot of our research and our wins to make inclusive design a top priority. So again, we are creating a component library with our design partners. We're using the component library across many different products, including employee and player experience, so that they are more accessible and user-friendly. So like I said, the future of gaming has already happened, but it's happened to other companies. And we really see this last year, inclusivity is just top of mind everywhere. It's been a big year. I think that we've had a unifying experience because of the COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter movement. It's kind of forced a lot of people to re-examine and prioritize, and it also has caused a lot of employees to demand a more equitable experience for themselves and underrepresented groups. And we see that companies are moving forward to diversify their employees. So VMware has a neurodiversity inclusion program, which considers outreach and hiring process for people who are neurodivergent to help remove the friction and helps ensure support and mentorship as they onboard and as they are going through all of the different employee life cycles. We also see something very exciting with Starbucks. So they opened an inclusive design cafe in Korea. The cafe is designed for people with disabilities and has also trained the baristas in basic sign language, which is really an amazing and interesting and innovative way of participating in what I feel is a movement. And then we see different companies that are hiring for inclusive design specific research design and product roles. So you may start to see product roles that have inclusive design product manager, inclusive product manager. And I think that's really exciting because I think there's acknowledgement that is going on that you know, we need to build more inclusive products. Our culture is becoming more diverse. And this is the way that, you know, things are moving forward. I hope for the day that we are actually talking about inclusive design and inclusive research, that it's just something that we're doing. So I think I may have mentioned this, but 57% of video game players in the US between the ages of 6 and 29 will be people of color in 10 years. So just to look at where gaming is headed. So there is more investment in content for games. We look at how female gamers are purchasing in games. So there are a lot more microtransactions and other like types of add-ons that are occurring in games for female gamers. This is kind of part of the reason is because we see that there's a desire for customization within games and personalizing different characters within games. And then we also see that the games appeal to older audiences. So there's actually been an increase in players between the ages of 55 and 64 from 2018 to 2020. So I think that's like really exciting for gaming just in general, that it's acknowledging we're getting the data out that, again, you know, it's not just the 16-year-old who is, you know, gaming after school. It is a very diverse demographic of people who are gaming. So I also want to talk a little bit about creating a bridge to the talent pipeline and acknowledge that there is diversity. There are underrepresented groups and people who are game developers. And just because we don't hear about them or that there are fewer of those people and those groups, it doesn't mean that they're not there. And I want to acknowledge that. I also want to say that this pipeline of underrepresented groups, again, is there. We look and see that on average, just 2% of technology workers in 7 Silicon Valley companies have released staffing numbers, and 3% of those people are Black and Hispanic. Last year, 4.5% of all new recipients of bachelor degrees in computer science or computer engineering from prestigious research universities were African American, and 6.5 were Hispanic, according to the data from a Computing Research Association. So we see that there is a pipeline, but what we're looking for are a bridge for game studios to be able to bridge that gap and examine its process, its hiring process, the biases, the friction that it's causing for underrepresented groups to get hired. And how are we building, our companies so that there is an environment for underrepresented groups to come and thrive. So to kind of end this on hope, however, there are some bridges that I've seen. So there is a great program by Facebook for Black gaming creators, and at EA to be able to fill in the gap for people who would like to get some training online. There's been a program for software engineering virtual experience program where people can understand like what it's like to be a game developer, to understand kind of like what the responsibility is, get acquainted to terminology, some of the processes, some of the things involved with that, and of course available online and free. So that's it, except for if you would like to know more and to access this playbook, you can reach out to me, and happy to share this out with anyone who's hoping to build inclusive research, inclusive design at their company, hoping to make a more hospitable, equitable place at their work so that they again can build a better product, a more inclusive product.
Thank you, Faith. That was awesome. I very much enjoyed that. Lucy, do we have any questions?
We do. We have a question from Nancy on Twitter who asks, for those of us who are just starting out and want to also be inclusive in our careers, where do we go to find these resources? How do we get started in getting into these companies? I'm assuming is what the question is saying.
Yes, in there, so I am seeing that there are more online workshops available to folks who want to get involved. There is a outfit called Creative Reaction Lab that has a really great workshop that's about design thinking and how design thinking really contributes to inequity. And so I would invite her to, she can reach out to me, and I can provide a list of resources. Again, I have a playbook that I've spent kind of a year creating, because I was looking for these materials online, much like Tracy, couldn't find a lot, or a lot of what I found was very academic. I will say that it really helps to look in academia because if you are at a company, you're in the day-to-day, you're trying to ship out a product, you may not have a lot of time and resources to be able to conduct some of this research. So academia is very important. But yeah, happy to share anything.
Sorry. Another question was, could you give an example of how using user exposure would work?
Sure. So what people try to do is try to invite their stakeholders to some of these research studies. So maybe you have one-on-one interviews with your customers. What you would do is you would invite your stakeholders to come and maybe participate in terms of asking questions, being there. If you have stakeholders who don't have the time, sometimes you have to bring that exposure to your readout, your reporting. So what that would look like is using a lot of multimedia to really be able to bring the stakeholder and have them kind of wearing the shoes of the researcher as they're going through the reporting. That may look like audio, it may look like video, it could look like a lot of verbatims, it could be a combination, it could be illustration. It's about getting really creative and being able to do that storytelling. So user exposure is what we try to achieve for all teams, not just our stakeholders, but for design and our product team, so that they can really see the customer and the user using the product and their behaviors as the user is trying to complete tasks.
Awesome. And I have a question myself, which is, as a person who I'm disappointed to hear that I'm not unusual as a person who plays. Your stats were wonderful there. I thought, I'm a woman over 40. I definitely can't be a usual player, but I guess I am according to your stats. So that was great. But as a person with a disability, how do I or other people with disabilities find the titles that work for us?
Yes, so there is, and I am blanking on the name right now, but there's actually a site that reviews all of the games, not all of them, but a lot of games, and they review
Able
them from the
Gamers.
Able Gamers is one, but there is actually a site that just focuses on giving, like you would see like Rotten Tomatoes, but they would actually give reviews on games and who can actually play them. And I wish I wasn't blanking on the name.
I think that's Can I Play That?
Yes, that is. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely. So yes, I would go there. And also, when games are launching, they'll launch and there'll be a lot of kind of content around the different accessibility features that games are offering. Those are good times to find out. But as we're, one of my missions has been to, it's not enough just to have games be accessible. We also have to have everything around the game be accessible, such as the support and the help services. So, I would kind of leverage some of those resources and check them out and check out kind of some of the notes that are that are published around releases to find out what types of accessibility features the games are offering.
Excellent. Let me check one last time here. Nothing in Slack and nothing in Zoom.
All right.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I
Yeah.
look forward to trying an EA Games title in the future.
Very nice. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Faith. For everybody else, if you liked this session, hit that YouTube like button. And don't forget, you can subscribe to youtube.com/inclusivedesign24 to be kept in the loop on our future events. A reminder that ID24 is a respectful community, and you can find our code of conduct on the Inclusive Design 24 website. Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you with thanks to our supporters: Intopia, Fable, TPGI Arc, Adobe, Tetralogical, Intuit, InfoAxia, Center for Inclusive Design, Web Directions AAA, Adrian Roselli LLC, Can Access. Inclusive Design 24 will be back on the hour with our next session, so we will see you then. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Faith and Lucy.
Thank you, Adrian.